This is hypnotic authenticity. This is a space for inner clarity, where hypnosis meets self-inquiry, where the stories that you carry can become gentle invitations for change. We're going to explore identity, emotional harmony, and authentic living through subtle, mindful approaches and a really, really good sprinkling of hypnosis. So take a slow, deep breath and let's begin.
I'm going to offer you a little gift, a little experience that personally I think gets to the heart and soul and core of kind of everything I do. Okay. Because I'm an intellectualizer. I'm a thinker. I can very easily be a ruminator. And I love this to show me that there is so much more than that. Okay. So if you've kind of got an engineer's brain, if you like to critically chew on things, if you tend to say yes, but a lot, then I would encourage you to go along with this experience with me. Okay. So there's not really much that you need to do, but it's not going to be particularly hypnotic, but I want you to pay your full attention to it. So please don't go along with the video whilst driving or operating machinery. Only do so when it's basically okay for you to give it your full attention. Okay. Doesn't particularly matter if you're sat or standing, presumably if you're watching a video, you may well be sat down. Just be free, be kind of open. The only thing that I want you to do whilst you're sat there or whilst you're stood there with a kind of an open chest and open hands, separate your hands. The only thing I want you to do, and it's dead easy, is just to pay attention to your left hand. Just focus your attention on your left hand. And we're going to do that for the next 30 seconds, minute, something like that. So focus all of your attention on your left hand. Not thinking about the hand, but feeling the hand. Feel the hand. Feel each of the fingers. And feel the space between the fingers. Focus all of your attention on your left hand and the feeling of each of the fingers, feeling of the palm, or the feeling of the space between the fingers. And just keep feeling that hand. And what I want you to notice is the difference now between how that hand feels and the right hand. Because if you're like me, you can feel an increased blood flow in your left hand. You can feel your pulse in your left hand. You might feel a tingling sensation in your left hand. You can feel a difference in temperature. The left hand probably feels a little warmer. It might even feel a little fatter, as if there's more blood in the left hand than in the right hand. And now, just for fun, what I want you to do is focus on your right hand. Feel your right hand. And maybe they're in the same position as they were, or maybe you've kind of moved them around. Focus your attention on your right. Keep your hands still, apart. Focus on the right hand. Focus on the palm. Focus on the fingers of the right. Focus on each finger in turn. And focus on the space between the fingers. And again, we're just going to focus on that hand the next 30 seconds or so. Focusing on the right hand. Focusing on the palm. Focusing on the temperature. Focusing on each finger. Focusing on the space between each finger. Noticing the air around each finger. Noticing the difference in temperature between the air and the finger. And again, notice what you're noticing. Because if you're like me, the right hand's now feeling tingly. The right hand's now feeling like there's more blood in it, like it's literally warmer, fatter, tingling. There's a pulse in it that wasn't before. And whilst you're focusing on the right hand, what's happened to the left hand? Maybe it's come back to normal completely. Maybe there's still a sort of a hint of tingliness in the two. And now, as I'm talking to you and you're focusing on my words, what's happened to the hands now? If you're like me, hands have gone back completely normal. But the point is, whilst you were focusing your attention on the hands, I mean, this was not imaginary. You can measure this. They literally warmed up. You can see people's hands get red. They can become blotchy in the space of a minute or two. The temperature is measurably warmer. Okay? So consider what happened with that first hand, right? So you placed all your attention on the left hand, and suddenly it was, I don't know, it had a tingling sensation. It was warmer. It was like me. It was actually, I could feel that the blood was trapped in the hand. But the thing is, the left hand and the right hand are made of the same stuff. Okay? There's only one heart. The blood is circulating through the whole of my system. And yet, by placing my attention on the left hand, physiologically, things change. So the question is, what's different, right? The two hands are made of the same stuff. There's one heart pumping blood everywhere in the system. And yet there's a temperature change, there's a physiological change. You can notice the sensations in the hand, even though both hands have got the same nerve endings. The only difference is your attention, your intention to pay attention. In other words, the only difference is consciousness. Now, this for me, this was the first time I came across it, a jaw-dropping moment. Because what's going on, I was going to give a generalization, and I hate to give a generalization, so I won't say we think, but I think in terms of kind of got a scientific brain, right? I like to see proof of things. I put my faith in science, in rigorous testing. And so I focus on tangibles, on things that I can see, touch. And when that's not sufficient, I focus on my imagination. Yeah? I imagine stuff. And I can use that as a tool to come to decisions. But it turns out it's almost as if there is a third way of seeing. There's a more connected way of knowing, which is thoughtless, which comes when you give into it rather than choosing to. So the scientific rigorous approach is I see with my eyes the physical world and I come to conclusions of that. The sort of the imaginary eye is saying, okay, I can draw pictures in my mind and I can come to conclusions, I can come to motivations based around that. The third way of knowing is a thoughtlessness. It's a giving into what you don't know and coming to a knowing from that, from where you don't know, which is hard for someone who wants to see proof. It's hard for someone who wants to say, yes, but, okay? It's hard for someone who wants to focus on the practicalities of life and get stuff done. Because we're talking about something which is universal, yeah, kind of ethereal. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. They are all useful. But what I'm saying is when you're trapped inside the scientific, substantial way of seeing the world, you're not seeing the rest. And the thing is, you only get substance. You only observe and notice the power of substance because of the unsubstance, right? There is a yin to every yang. There is an expansion to every contraction. There is an insubstance to every substance. Why is that important? When I'm working with someone hypnotically, I'm trying to get that person to see that the frame within which they are viewing themselves is kind of limited. And it's probably, if they are coming from the Western world, limited because of that scientific, rigorous cause effect, if this, then that thought process. And so in hypnosis, what I'm trying to do with someone is demonstrate to them a phenomena which they don't appear to have generated, which appears to have unfurled. Because that means there's stuff going on more than they were thinking of. Yeah. And for me, what's going on with this physiological response to nothing but consciousness shows that the world is made of more than stuff. It's not just paying attention to the things that you can prove, that you can lay your hands on, that is important. It is important to have scientific rigor. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with scientific rigor. It's incredibly useful to be able to hypothesize and to eliminate things which are useless. But the sheer fact that science has not come up with a hypothesis doesn't necessarily mean that something is untrue. Yeah. If you look at most of the things that we thought we knew 100 years ago to today, the world has massively changed, okay? The Newtonian world, which was based around evidential physicalness, has given way to a quantum physical world, okay? Where even at the smallest particle level, it turns out that a particle is made of more insubstantial stuff than it is of substantial stuff. That depending upon the observer, a particle is a particle or a wave, which means that the observer is no longer an observer. If the observer looks for a particle, he or she finds a particle. If the observer looks for a wave, he or she finds a wave, which means that the observer is a participant, which means that we are not observing the system from outside of it. We are observing from within it. We have an impact upon it. And that is what consciousness is. So consciousness, in my example physically, is leading energy. And so what we think of as a static system in which we observe and we come to conclusions ain't necessarily so, because by expecting, by coming up with hypotheses, by having a presupposition, we guide the result. So we end up, where focus goes, energy flows. We end up coming up with a conclusion that we expected. We create our own sense of reality. What this is doing physically is saying, by nothing other than the power of my intention, by the focus of my attention, I can shift things physiologically that are measurable. So I have to start looking at the world in a slightly different way. It's insufficient to consider the world as made of a million pieces of stuff. That the unstuff is just as important. Now, I'm no quantum physicist, so unfortunately I cannot go down to that level of discussion. And it doesn't matter, because for me, the perceptive shift is what's massively important. Because what it means is that the things that I am hanging my hooks of knowledge upon are not everything, that not everything is physical, that the insubstantial is as important, perhaps more important than the substantial, and that the way to access that is not through this eye of the body, and it's not through my imagination, which is seen through the veil of my fixed ideas, but it's by transcending that. It's by going to your sense of unknowing, of thoughtlessness, and seeing what emerges from that. That's why meditation is so powerful. Yeah. And for me, that is conceptually exactly what hypnosis is. Okay. I'm offering someone an alternative perception that is broader and less defined than the one that they wish the world was. So it's a paradox, okay? But what is a paradox? A paradox is a difference between how should things be and how they are, right? How you feel that they ought to be and how they are. Intellectualizing. I'm an intellectual, okay? I'm a thinker. I'm a ruminator. The word in Latin, intellegere, means to choose between. The whole purpose of intellectualizing is to consider things and come to conclusions about those things, as if everything in the world is considerable from a perception of things. What I'm saying is that is only one way of thinking, and it's a very limited way of thinking. And once you go beyond that, once you become more comfortable with the intangibles in life, in the insubstantial things in life, well, then thinking in terms of what is substantial in the thousand things in your world suddenly becomes very, very constricting. It becomes very limiting because the world is broader than that. And once you consider what you don't know, what cannot be in your imagination because that is based around the structure of your ideas, your fixed ideas, your physiology, your experiences of the past, then I think you're going on this path of awakening, right? I think the path of awakening is going to a stage of acceptance, of transcending what you think it is to be you, and to open up. And this silly little exercise of focusing your attention on one hand and noticing what occurs and how that is not what should be occurring, for me, is a way of connecting with everything, of linking this thing that I call I with everything around, with unity, with source, with with a sort of sense of universal harmony, which I just play a part in rather than thinking I am dictating. And from that, somewhere comes a sort of a sense of peace, a sense of beauty, a sense of awe, a sense of curiosity, a massive sense of what you don't know. When you start down this path, it can be quite scary because you start by removing bricks from your sense of reality, but you come to observe a broadness in which somehow or other you play a part in the dance of the universe, rather than thing being binary, being I and not I. Funny, from a little experience in the hands, we've got quite transcendental, quite metaphorical. And maybe the whole of this is a metaphor. But for me, it's incredibly comforting. I feel I belong when I go beyond the physical realm, when I go beyond the universe of things, when I go beyond the imaginary needs of my brain, of my system. And I kind of expand beyond that and give up on that and become thoughtless. Chew on that. For me, this is absolutely the keys to throwing away the irritations, the obsessions, the limitations, the definitions, and opening up kind of everything. This all came to me because I was sat here looking at the glorious expanse of the lake. I don't know if you can see the hills behind with the snow upon them. And so I thought I'd give you a gift. I hope that means something sufficiently spiritual and expansive, like it does me. I mean, this is a wonderful way of finding a place in the world, reducing my significance in the world, bringing about a sense of humility, a sense of beauty, a sense of awe. I'm repeating myself now, but the world is an amazing place. All right. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that's not too long. I've got a little there's a swan coming down to say hello. Let me show you. Little swan. There we go. And presumably he thinks I'm going to feed him some bread. All right. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, if it supported you in some way or helped you to question your inner experience, then follow the show. Personally, I would be really grateful if you might also leave a quick rating. It makes a huge difference in terms of discoverability so that other people who might benefit can find the podcast. If you prefer a visual element, check out Authentic Life Hypnosis on YouTube. And if you're looking for deeper work beyond one-way audio yourself, you're very welcome to reach out. Equally, if you have any questions, I'm here to help. Until next time.